It's been a while since I've covered a pure domestic thriller, and usually when it comes to choice, you can't go wrong with pretty much any thriller that came out of the 90s when it reached its peak pre-millennium paranoid popularity. With the likes of Basic Instinct, Single White Female, Cape Fear, Primal Fear, and well, the list goes on, this prime period for the genre saw a relative resurgence in the 70s trend of breaching the safety and harmony of the domestic suburban lifestyle. A lot of these movies played heavily on noir character tropes of deception, distrust, deviance, and just the general uncertainty of human motive, with some even dealing with far more urgent implications like domestic terrorism. Like, for as awesome as Speed is as a popcorn flick, it has an all-too-real villain that cannot be understated. However, stripping it back to its effective basics, there was one film that managed to pluck itself out of the 90s and avoid drowning in oversaturation, becoming a borderline postmodern take on the genre with a stylistic 21st century polish. That was David Fincher's Panic Room. Panic Room tells the story of a divorcee called Meg, who purchases a modified house in inner-city Manhattan in the hopes of starting a fresh new life with her diabetic daughter Sarah. However, talk about bad luck, because on their first night, they find themselves terrorized by 3 intruders, attempting to rob a safe buried within a fortified panic room where Meg and Sarah hide. It effectively becomes a cleverly directed Hitchcockian game of cat and mouse, with the intruders attempting to get Meg and Sarah out of their proverbial mousehole, while the mother and daughter duo desperately attempt to make contact with the outside world. On the surface, it's a very simple film that's difficult to sell without going into the intricacies of what makes it so compelling. There's nothing in here that's going to shock or surprise you, but by keeping it as subdued and low-key as possible, the storytelling is delivered in a realistic and organic way that respects your intelligence to piece together all the details for yourself. There's no exposition or contrived monologues to answer its many questions. Everything you learn is through dialogue and visuals, both attention-grabbing and easy to miss, that come together to form a mostly clear picture of the circumstances surrounding the house, the panic room, and the contents of the safe. The movie has been universally praised for its masterful suspense, and perhaps ranks as David Fincher's most underrated film after coming off his 90s cult classics Seven, The Game, and Fight Club, as well as a certain alien film that even he agrees doesn't exist. Yet, for all the deserved attention given to Fincher's filmmaking, I think Panic Room is carried even more so by its impeccable characterization. The subtle way it humanizes the intruders while still keeping you firmly against them adds a moral complexity that, at the very least for its time, was fairly uncommon in home invasion movies. As an aficionado of that specific subgenre, Panic Room is incredibly tame as far as intensity is concerned, but I think it serves to make the whole thing more believable by modestly portraying the intruders as just average men with no discernible allure to them. Now, before you comment, yes, there is the impatient balaclava wearing one, but I'll come back to him in the second half spoilers because the way it sort of develops by undeveloping his character deserves its own attention. Anyway, getting into the story, you get an immediate understanding of the intruders right from their very first interaction. Forrest Whitaker's Burnham is organized and professional, Jared Leto's Jr. is an impulsive, boisterous drug addict, yep, don't worry internet, you will appreciate what happens to his character, and Raoul is, well...
Who are you? I'm Raoul.
Yeah, he's a wild card of sorts. Their characterization is remarkably subversive to the deeply uncomfortable tone that the film sets. They're not cartoonishly clumsy or quirky to the point you laugh at them and their misfortunes, but there is a natural humor to their personalities that's accentuated by how they clearly do not work well together. As such, so much of the internal conflict comes from them fighting over what to do, and when you remove their criminal antics from the equation, the clashing of egos is shockingly shockingly relatable. At the same time, they never stop being threatening men because the ambiguities of their backstory make it difficult to gauge just how dangerous and potentially violent they are. You end up asking yourself, is it all big bravado talk, or can they actually walk the walk? Heck, being a Fincher fan and going off his other films, I was automatically conditioned to thinking it would be nihilistic, so I personally had that heightened level of dread that the whole situation would come to a very bleak outcome, especially when Sarah's diabetes takes drastic effect later on. It might seem small, but there is a constant what if lingering in the back of your mind of what will happen if they get Meg and Sarah, and it's that uncertainty that truly perpetuates the suspense. It's very selective in the type of information it gives you, and to me, that is the most distinct quality to all of Fincher's films. True to real life, every character has something going on in their head that you will just never learn, no matter how much you think you know them, and what is fundamental to the tension is that you kinda just have to learn to deal with it. Panic Room deals a lot with communication, or rather miscommunication, whether it be Burnham asking Junior to do a task and him misunderstanding it, or the simple matter of just not explaining their plans to each other, thus resulting in them individually reading situations differently. Or more significantly, we have the major communicating factor between the intruders and Meg. Meg can speak to them via intercom, but there is no audio on her end, so she doesn't know what they're saying and has limited information from the grainy surveillance cameras. I've already alluded to the fact that there's basically a game of bluff in effect, where the intruders don't exactly know what Meg is capable of doing when it comes to personal ingenuity. Maybe she did call the police, maybe she does have a gun, maybe she's just clever as hell and finds ways to thwart the limitations of the panic room. The thing is, Burnham has a full understanding of the room's capabilities, because it's revealed through small dialogue notes that he was one of its designers. But it's not the tools you need to worry about, it's the person using them. Again, there is an unceasing uncertainty around the characters to the point that nobody trusts anyone. However, we as the audience witness everything unfold. Nothing is withheld from us. We see and hear all the visual and auditory clues to understand what the characters are doing. As such, we see that the back and forth attack and defend never works in anyone's favour. For example, the intruders attempt to gas the room to draw Meg and Sarah out, only for Meg to set the gas canister alight. Then later, Meg attempts to use the phone line to call the police and her ex-husband, while the intruders attempt to shut it down. There's a constant pendulum to the film's momentum, as well as moments of futility, such as having Meg and Sarah try to signal a neighbour via flashlight, only for the neighbour to do exactly what I would probably do. It's essentially an elevated form of Hitchcock's bomb under the table. It shows us everything, but it's the fact that both oppositions can't see what the other is doing that heightens the anxiety. So this brings us to the unique situational aspect of the story, because almost every home invasion film is set in some desolate big house in the arsehole of nowhere, but Panic Room is set in a fairly dense, busy New York neighborhood. What makes Panic Room an oddly unique setting is that despite being surrounded by hundreds of neighbours, Meg and Sarah could not be made any more isolated. There's an irony to them being in a room designed to protect them for this very reason, but all it really does is traps them in a box with no means to communicate with the outside world. Now, I didn't have much to say that doesn't speak for itself, but doing some research, I was surprised to find Panic Room received an actual academic analysis, and I want to share a brilliant observation by John Kitterman in his Journal of American Culture article entitled Homeland Invasion, Poe, Panic Rooms, and 9/11. Kitterman's basic outline is this. When Meg is first introduced to the Panic Room when inspecting the house for purchase, the presence and claustrophobia reminds her of Edgar Allan Poe's work, in which one of his stories, Premature Burial, focuses on, in Kitterman's words, being buried alive from the first-person point of view. As Kitterman explains, the connection she makes is deliberate, as it does seem ironic that the fear of being buried alive has metamorphosized into the desire to be entombed within one's own home. It's an absolutely perfect encapsulation of Meg's experience. The situation technically symbolizes what she's going through in her own personal life. In the opening, we learn that Meg is going through a rough divorce and feels an overwhelming anxiety for her and her daughter's future that then permeates within the house. There is a discomfort to it that never seems to go away. For such a contemporary, ordinary setting, it's uninviting without making you question it. It doesn't elaborately feel haunted or dilapidated, it's just empty and unfulfilling. In fact, Meg's friend even tells the realtor to stop describing it as a property, as it sort of calls attention to its industrial mechanical coldness that's then further reinforced by Fincher's voyeuristic emphasis on the house's inner details, as well as the heavy rain weighing over it. In short, the house reflects Meg's current disposition. It's scary, isolated and lonely, and it's only exacerbated by the very invasion the house was designed to withstand. Kitterman is right. The panic room is not a safe haven, it's a fucking tomb that seems to trap its occupants rather than defend them. Now, I want to briefly touch on one last thing mentioned in the title of Kitterman's article, and well, to keep it as light and sensitive as possible, there is an argument to say the film spoke differently in the post-9/11 age. There is a lot of material out there, specifically on the impact 9/11 had on the American horror genre, and with the subject matter of Panic Room, it being a domestic home invasion thriller set in Manhattan, it inherently tapped into a tangible sense of panic and distress caused by such a harrowing and devastating event. To be clear, Panic Room was in no way influenced by said events, but having just finished production and released 6 months after in March 2002, during what we could describe as a state of restlessness and insecurity, it naturally gave the film more provocative weight. I'm not going to say anything more on that, but it is something I've wanted to address in other videos talking about films within that era. It's just that Panic Room seems like the most appropriate film to add that further context. So from here on out, I'm going to go into major spoiler territory, specifically talking about our boy Raoul. So if you don't want the film spoiled, please leave now, and for anyone else, brace yourself. So what's the deal with Raoul, you ask? Well, it depends if the country musician Dwight Yoakam means anything to you, because I assume having a beloved country musician be the most terrifying character in the film was a deliberate casting decision. I've probably hyped it more than I should, but Raoul begins as a wildcard who throws a spanner in the works by being the most outwardly aggressive character, before eventually forcing his way into being an equal partner in the operation when Junior's plan begins to fail. After several failed attempts to get into the panic room, Junior, in a fit of pain and frustration, decides to fold and leave the house, but not before accidentally letting it slip that there is more money in the safe than Burnham and Raoul realize. Junior basically intended to steal the majority of the money for himself without any plan on how to avoid getting caught by the other men, leading to Raoul abruptly shooting him, bringing the threat of murder into reality. Soon after, Meg's ex-husband Stephen arrives following a confused phone call just as the power was cut, prompting Raoul to beat him to near death in a torturous bid to force Meg out once and for all. Eventually, Burnham and Raoul do get into the panic room after Meg leaves to obtain Sarah's medication for her worsening diabetes, and it's at this point we finally see Raoul unmasked. But it deliberately works against his character. It suddenly demystifies him and takes away his menacing presence, leaving him as a feeble man no better than Junior or Burnham, with the cherry on top being him break down in panic and agony after getting his hand jammed in the panic room door, seemingly giving Meg the upper hand. You could say he even begins to mirror the same reckless impulses as Junior despite his initial cold, calculated composure. It completely shatters the uncertainty that's carried the suspense up to this point, as the dynamic shifts to Meg planning to fight back after the intruders end up being the ones now trapped in the panic room. I'm not going to walk you through all the details of the climax, but the one thing I will specifically focus on is how the ending tries to call back to Burnham's morality in a way that will divide audiences on whether it's satisfying or not. After obtaining the money in the form of bonds, Burnham and Raoul attempt to exit the house, leading to a fight between Raoul and Meg while Burnham bails it, only to return and execute Raoul to stop him from killing the family. Burnham then goes back outside and is immediately arrested when the police arrive following an earlier suspicious interaction with Meg where she attempted to get rid of the cops checking in on a disturbance call so that the intruders wouldn't hurt Sarah still trapped in the panic room with them. So here's the thing, for me, Burnham is the film's most complex character, because he's the only intruder with a clear, albeit skewed moral code, where he refuses to engage in any altercation with the family. In other words, Burnham won't participate in violence, but still reluctantly lets Junior and Raoul do so, even if he's still in the room. It's a really twisted hypocrisy in that as long as Burnham's hands are literally clean, he seems to have a clear conscience about it. Hell, to further demonstrate the moral conflict, Burnham even medicates Sarah in the panic room when Meg is trapped outside. He is, at best, reasonably compassionate, but even by saving the family, the idea that it absolves him for his trespasses is a flimsy moral outcome. In his perspective, by killing Raoul and going against his passive moral code as it were, he sees that as a favour of sorts, a redemption for the distress this ordeal has caused. The point is, the contradiction in his morality is believable. It's almost like the trolley problem philosophy. Does he stay disconnected from other people's actions and let those people make their own choices regardless of what he believes, or does he get his hands dirty and intervene for the sake of upholding some form of justice? As a result, having Burnham survive and get arrested is a purgatorial punishment that suits the morality of his character. If he died, it would seem tragic given how much it tries to make us sympathetic of him, but if he were to escape with the money, it would feel morally unjust. So, in the end, we have a middle ground decided by moral committee. Burnham gets arrested and the bonds are destroyed in the rain, making all his efforts meaningless simply because he did what he felt was right, despite causing a situation that was always morally wrong. Obviously, it's presented far simpler than the way I just described it, but it is a thoughtful footnote that I think helps make sense of the madness, I suppose. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your thoughts in the comments below, consider liking and subscribing if you haven't done so already, and until next time, stay safe, stay away from panic rooms, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye!